on screen, it's more often than not written by a white man or a white woman. Mostly a white man, but a white woman more so than any other woman of color. And I think that's where you get these stereotypical archetypes that just keep regurgitating, like the sassy Black woman, the fiery Latina, the Asian tiger mom, and you just keep seeing this stuff over and over and over again to the point where you start to think it might be real. And if you take a step back and you get a wider lens and you see the people writing these stories are the same people watching these stories. They watch it, they write it. They watch it, they write it. They watch it, they write it. And what they watch and what they write becomes the reality for so many people. And that's really the work that I think needs to be done. I think that the more representation that you have behind the camera, the more real representation you can have on screen. And I think the more diverse stories you can tell.
And that's a wrap. The Weekly Wrap, ending July 17th, 2020. This week we're wondering, are we still playing the long game? And we conclude, Facebook is gonna Facebook. And how to be more purposeful with your purpose-driven content. So let's wrap it up, shall we? Our theme this week, the long game of purpose. As author and civil rights leader Howard Thurman once said, don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive. And go do it. Because what the world needs is for you to come alive. That's purpose. And this is the Weekly Wrap. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode number 78 of the Weekly Wrap, our weekly play on words that play in the world this week. This week, I've got a thought on the long game of purpose, and we've got just an amazing conversation with marketing leader Falayo Lasaki, someone who is truly elevating the game of content to a whole other level. As always, I'm your host, Robert Rose, Chief Strategy Advisor with the Content Marketing Institute, and it's time to get this week's show underway. Are you still playing the long game? It's a weird time to be thinking about your long-term purpose in your career, but it might just be the best time. Now, most of us want our work in some way to connect to a greater good, to reflect our passion, our purpose. But what if you don't know what that is yet? Or worse, what if you feel pressured right now to pick one because of everything going on in the world? I recently worked with a young marketing vice president at a startup company, and despite the company's success, she felt the startup's focus didn't really reflect her long-term passion. And she regretted that the brand hadn't developed a distinct position on all the current events in the world right now. She's not alone. There's more pressure than ever to find some long-term purpose in work earlier and earlier. Universities have even begun to help students focus on getting to their purpose rather than simply developing a career trajectory. It's not going very well. Recent research from Bates College and Gallup found a so-called purpose gap. They found that 80% of the surveyed graduates said purpose in their work was very or extremely important. However, less than half actually find it in their jobs. Now, it could be, as the research concluded, that higher education simply needs to do a better job of helping students find their purpose, but I think it's actually just putting too much pressure on students to find purpose when they've barely started their careers. Now, I think there's an ironic but quite beautiful twist here. Purpose seeking today is more daunting than ever before. But in this uniquely stressful year, the possibilities are richer, more diverse, and more open than they've been in decades. As you adapt to the next or new or just different normal, depending on your lens, there's a wide range of lifestyle, beliefs, value system choices for purpose seeking in our work. Both big and small brands value purpose more than ever. Why? Well, because quite frankly, it's more profitable than ever. Research finds that up to 62% of customers want and expect companies to take a stand on long-term purpose. And that's not just talk. Almost half, 47% of consumers that are disappointed in a brand's purpose or lack thereof will walk away in frustration. And 17%, they never come back. Seeking a higher purpose than simply creating customers, as Drucker might say, has become a viable and profitable business strategy. Now, consumers see through brands that latch on to a topical purpose simply for marketing purposes. The benefits of purpose-driven brand initiatives come when the purpose is in line with the brand's mission or reason for being. Similarly, finding what fuels your passion, your own best purpose, doesn't happen inadvertently. It takes time, effort, and experience. It's a long game. And now, well, now I've got something to do on purpose. It's time that we recognize that we can put the experience back into customer experience. You know, businesses all over the world have recognized that digital experiences, they're not a nice to have anymore. They are a must have. But how? How do you do that? How do you evolve into that wonderful customer experience? Well, there's that well-known saying that goes, content is king. But how do customers create and publish effective, engaging content that takes their customer experiences to a whole new level? Well, our sponsor, Sitecore, recently held its inaugural Virtual Marketer Day, and one of the tracks there was dedicated to helping organizations better manage their content from beginning all the way to the end. They've got this wonderful free post-event guide called Understanding the End-to-End Content Lifecycle. It's got practical, usable, actionable steps that you can take to optimize your content engine to personalize digital experiences for all of your customers. I want you to go download this guide today. You can see it here. That's cmi.media/sitecore-lifecycle. That URL again, cmi.media/sitecore-lifecycle. I want to thank the good folks at Sitecore for being our wonderful, wonderful sponsor. Now it's time for our interview segment, and boy, do we have a wonderful one for you this week. It's Falaio Lasaki. Falaio is just an amazing energy in the world. She is the founder and head of Striped Elephant. I love that name so much for that agency. It's a brand consultancy firm. She's got over 10 years of experience in marketing, communications, development, media, and entertainment. Falaio herself is an entertainment industry veteran. She's held marketing positions with companies like Variety, Landmark Theaters, Hollywire TV, Film Independent, IFP, and Filmmaker Magazine. She's a member of the IADAS, a voting member of the Telly Awards, and sits on the board of directors at the WIMMYs, which is, of course, is the Women in Media. Falaio is a graduate of Pepperdine University and UCLA and resides in LA, which, of course, is happy-making for me because it's a fellow Angelino here in Southern California. And as she says, she can often be found making a mess in the kitchen or waxing poetically about women and representation in media, which, ironically, maybe not ironically, synergistically, is what we talked about. We had one of the loveliest conversations I've had in a while, and it was all about what is going on with representation in media and how that applies to us these days as marketers and specifically content marketers. I think you're really going to love this interview with Falaio. Falaio, my friend, how are you? It's great to see you.
Great to see you as well. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for being on the show today. It's one of those things, it's a rare treat for me because a fellow Los Angelino get to, you're just across town over on the west side and me up here in the hinterlands of Kardashianville.
Yes.
So, um, but how is it? How is the whole sort of lockdown in California been for you? Has it been sort of a little weird? Has it been
Yeah. I mean,
good?
I think it's certainly a weird time. Never one that I expected to go through in my lifetime. I think there's a lot of soul searching. The Corona coaster creates a lot of emotion and space for thought, and then just like space to go a little nuts. I'm quarantining by myself. And so that has been an interesting challenge. I have always liked alone time. I think the novelty has somewhat worn off, but it's okay.
Longing for some human touch.
Where it's just like, okay, so this was fun. I would say my frustration, which is I'm sure is with everybody, is like you just thought, I'm like, okay, we're coming to the end of this, and then it's like, just kidding, no, we're not. Like,
Exactly.
everybody get back inside. So that's been a little. You're in California, the LA's been like, it's a little heartbreaker.
Absolutely. And it's the sort of mixed messaging that we get. You can
Yeah.
go to the beach, but you can't stop on the beach. You can actually go on the sidewalk, but don't walk on the sidewalk too close to anyone. You can go to the grocery store, but not that grocery store. It's like this weird sort of mixed messaging. I mean, you talk about marketing, bad marketing. This communication
Honestly,
is bad.
Seriously, it's terrible. This campaign gets like a solid D-, and that's being kind.
Well, okay. So speaking of getting a D-, we're going to segue a little bit into the news this week, and certainly talk a little bit about current events. And speaking distinctly of getting a D-, we have to talk about our friend Mark Zuckerberg here. And of course, he has been getting a D- of late, and certainly Facebook has been getting a D- of late, as he had meetings this week with leaders across all kinds of different organizations about the hate speech that's going on Facebook right now, and all of the boycotts that are happening from brands and marketers all over the world. And the article that we'll link to, of course, in the show notes comes to us courtesy of TechCrunch, although there are innumerable news organizations covering this. The article begins and it says, what began as a relatively small effort by activist organizations to hold Facebook accountable for perceived policy failings has snowballed into a mass corporate backlash and a rare moment of discomfort for a company that enjoys its status of one of tech's untouchable giants. As the hashtag Stop Hate for Profit campaign continues to attract surprisingly mainstream corporations to its boycott of Facebook advertising, Zuckerberg, Sheryl Sandberg, and the newly back at Facebook Chief Product Officer Chris Cox sat down with a group on Tuesday. Other members of the policy team and one more member of Facebook's product team were also present, which lasted a little over an hour. And the too long didn't read here is it didn't go that well.
Yeah.
Basically, it seems like Facebook's not really going to make meaningful changes here in what it's doing and is sort of being resistant. What's your take on this, and how is this, if at all, affecting what you're doing with your clients?
It's not affecting my clients much at all at this point. I actually have one client right now who was already, like for years, it was like, no, we don't spend money with Facebook. And so I think that hasn't been too much of an effect. I think the interesting thing is that Facebook is the same Facebook today as it was last week, as it was last month, as it was 2 years ago and 4 years ago. So I always get I'm like, the surprise is surprising to me. That's
shocking. There's gambling going on here.
Yeah, I'm like, what? I'm sorry. Has Facebook offended you in a way by its new behavior? It's like, this is who and what Facebook is and does, and it's a private company with a ton of public power, and I think with that comes a lot of just challenges and a lot of like, what do you actually do? I read something yesterday, I think it was yesterday, what is a day anymore,
Right.
really? But it was basically saying that Facebook's stock has gone up amidst all of these boycotts. So it's like they're still making money. And that's probably the part that I would focus in on a little more. Some of the boycotts from the brands, I'm always more interested in the motivation. Like I said, Facebook is the same Facebook that it's always been. Right now, we're in a time of real economic unrest where people are looking at ways to cut costs. And if we can jump on board and boycott something at the same time, where it's like we're saving money and we look good. So I think there's a lot of conversations that have to be had around the boycott, Facebook's behavior, what it actually means to, close these groups. Like the groups don't go away because their Facebook page is gone. And so the bigger conversations that I would always like to have are, how do we change people on the inside? How do we create opportunities for personal growth and real growth from an individual's perspective? Because Facebook, take them off of Facebook, they create a new network. And so I think that there is, sure, a responsibility on Facebook's part to make sure that they are creating a safe and equitable space. But I also think that that is really more of a symptom than it is the actual disease.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you've got a great point there. I mean, my perspective on it is I see what they're doing there. And just to your point, it's like, this is not new. This is,
Yeah,
this Facebook is, Facebook gonna Facebook, right?
seriously.
And so, when you look at it, you go, of course they're doing this. And of course they're waiting it out. And of course this is a drop in the bucket. They can afford to wait this out. The real
And they
question
know
I
it.
have,
Yeah,
to me, it says much more around, if you look at the brands that are boycotting, well, they're still posting to their Facebook pages and they're still
exactly.
utilizing Facebook. They're just not, throwing ad dollars that way. I think if it's going to be meaningful, if you're really going to stand behind this. So I look more to the brands than I do. I kind of don't care
Exactly.
about Facebook one way or the other. I look at the brands that are standing up here and say, great, that's wonderful. What are you doing that actually is meaningful, to your point, right? Getting to the real
Yeah.
people, the audience, the sort of meat of the situation, rather than the channel, right? I mean, it reminds me so much of, when they boycott some newscaster on Fox or MSNBC. Well, they're still putting money on other time slots,
Totally.
and so it's kind of a, it's sort of a meaningless gesture after all. So we'll see, I guess. We'll see what
Yeah.
actually.
I'm interested to see what actually becomes from all of this. But like, if you have 4 million people on your Facebook page, just because you got rid of like your ad spend for 1 month, like you're still bringing money into Facebook. Like,
Right.
like you bring the people, you bring the money. If
That's
people
right.
want to make actual change, when you start seeing Facebook lose users, when you start seeing brands and publishers, which Facebook built it, that's its bread and butter. It's like Facebook, the article says that Facebook is this massive communication tool. It's like, exactly. But what if it wasn't?
Right.
Like, the only people that make it the massive communication tool is us.
Right.
So, and I'm not here to say that that's right or wrong, but it is what it is. So what is the boycott if all the boycott really does is make you look good? And so
right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. It's an easy way to do some, some virtue signaling, right?
Exactly.
Well, all right. So let's schedule and move out of there, right?
Moving
Segue out of
along.
there, because some of the stuff that I know that you're doing is focusing in on the real crux of this. One of the things that I know that you're passionate about is really working on representation of audience in the entertainment sector, which of course, you and I both come from. I came from TV
Yep.
and you came from the entertainment industry and have been working in it for a long time. And I know you're passionate about how sort of that impacts in the same way that Facebook does,
Yeah.
has such impact on the culture, on the people, on audiences. So tell me a little bit about what you're working on and how you're starting to approach this sort of real multiculturalism and the impact that it's having.
Yeah, so something that has been, I started out, I've been in entertainment basically in some facet or another, for going on 20 years. And something that has always struck me is this idea around representation and inclusivity and what that really looks like. And I think, my background, I'm a first generation American. So like even my growing up, the representation that I've seen of my story has pretty much been non-existent as far as on screen. And I think that what you see happening a lot of times is, again, before virtue signaling had a name, it was virtue signaling. But one of the places that I've really focused my attention is on this intersection of women and people of color. That is women of color, mostly. I am a woman of color, so that's something that I have noticed as an area in entertainment that gets sort of bypassed. The conversations around equity and inclusion, and if you go back and you look at the studies and you kind of peek through everything, there are these topics and they say, here are the numbers for women, here are the numbers for people of color. Both of those numbers are somewhat dismal, right? Now, there's a group, like this is women, this is people of color, this is women of color. Like we're below the camera right now. And when I see women of color, I'm not speaking of Black women. I'm speaking of anybody who is not Caucasian, is included in that list. And so I think that that is the place that I think that there just needs to be more work done in the space. I think that what you see on television, what you see in films, has a profound effect on how you perceive the world. There are people in this country and in this world whose only introduction to a different type of person is by what they see on screen. That is what they assume. So if, in the wake of what's happening in the world, if all of the stories that you're seeing are, brown and Black, gangsters, criminals, or victims, how do you not approach the world with that lens? And so that's something that I would like to see changed. And I think when you look at the numbers of who's actually writing the stories, there are very, very few females of color writing any stories. Even if you see a woman of color on screen, it's more often than not written by a white man or a white woman. Mostly a white man, but a white woman more so than any other woman of color. And I think that that's where you get these stereotypical archetypes that just keep regurgitating, like the sassy Black woman, the fiery Latina, the Asian tiger mom, and you just keep seeing this stuff over and over and over again to the point where you start to think it might be real. And if you take a step back and you get a wider lens and you see the people writing these stories are the same people watching these stories. They watch it, they write it. They watch it, they write it. They watch it, they write it. And what they watch and what they write becomes the reality for so many people. And that's really the work that I think needs to be done. I think that the more representation that you have behind the camera, the more real representation you can have on screen. And I think the more diverse stories you can tell. I always laugh because I think diversity is just sort of a funny word in terms of the fact that there's an almost othering to the word diversity. Like when I go home to like my nuclear family for dinner, we are not a diverse group. And that's what I need people to understand. Like there is zero diversity amongst that group at the table. Like, yes, we're all very different people. We have diversity of thought, but like, that's not a diverse dinner. Like,
Right.
and so like you and I having this conversation, there's a diversity here. That is what diverse means. It just means different. It just means a collection of differing voices. And so I think when we equate diversity with brown or not white, we are in and of itself doing ourselves a disservice to the cause that we're trying to have. And so those are the things that just kind of get into my brain and kind of keep me up, like doing research projects on the side at night.
It's amazing. I mean, certainly, I mean, yeah, I appreciate this conversation so much because certainly it's something that I've grown. I mean, I grew up here in Hollywood and saw it, experienced it, had the privilege for it. When I, still hated the business. I mean, let's be clear. I did not have a good time as a writer in Hollywood. So let's be clear that it can still suck.
Yes.
But
I think it sucks no matter what. That's what makes it lovable.
But I think there's this interesting corollary to what you're talking about, even in marketing, right? Where we start looking at the examples given to us in popular culture.
Exactly.
And we apply them to our marketing. And even if we are a room full of diverse people, we start putting out homogenous stuff based on, well, this is popular, right? This is what pop culture is, right? This is what, even to the extent of, this is what rap looks like, and this is what urban looks like, and this is what hip hop is, and this is what, Mexican music is, and this is, all of those things start to become part of our marketing culture.
Yeah.
And it's sort of, we need to take that same sort of approach, bringing in those diverse voices, early on, certainly, to even get to something that, and the funny thing is that at its heart, it would be a differentiation, right? It would be different than everybody else is talking about.
And you need that. And I think it's about, shifting this word authentic. Like I've heard that in campaigns where it's like, well, I don't know, it just doesn't read authentic. It's like, what does that even mean?
Right.
Like, if I am the writer and I write it based off of my experience, and someone who has nothing to do with that experience is telling me that it's inauthentic, it's like, do you mean that the authenticity doesn't represent the stereotype? And I think that that's where that's where we just have to get out of our own way. And as marketers, it's like, I will tell you, there is nothing more, I don't know, frustrating or entertaining or some mix of both, but like multicultural marketing meetings, because it is like the most insulting, best intentioned room you've ever been in, where it's like, oh God, oh dear Lord, like where there's just so many of these conversations, and it's just, I know that you mean well, but can I repeat back to you what you've just said? Like there's so many of those conversations. And so I think, yes, bringing people in earlier, and also understanding that like, it is not just, white people that are watching or absorbing these stories. Like it is people of color as well. And I think that there is, there's all kinds of conversations and all kinds of movements to change those stories, because like the negative stereotypes or the negative things or the limiting things that you might see on screen, whether that be in advertising, whether that be in media or entertainment, as a person of color growing up, if that's what you see as aspirational, is if you see a ceiling as your aspiration, how do you push past it? And all of those barriers are illusions. They're not real. And so I think that's where there's a ton of power. And I think that that's where we as an industry, where we as marketers, where we as people who are responsible for putting these messages into people's brains just have to be better.
Yeah.
Across the board. Yeah.
I think that says it all, right? We just have to be better at it, right? And it's, in large part due to the work that you're doing, in sort of helping to shape what is, we often talk in marketing about how we look to filmmakers and television directors and actors and writers, and they're all the sort of heroes that we have as marketers, as sort of, well, these can be the ones to direct our commercials, these can be the ones that can help us write that next thing, these are the influencers that help us present our message out there in the world. And if we can be the foundation, right? If we can do better and be the foundation that they lean on in order to understand what would resonate, it feels like we could make some, we could, not just do what Facebook is doing or these brands are doing, but could actually make some real progress here.
Absolutely. And I think it's important because whether you love it, hate it, want to dismantle, whatever, it's like this is a society that is built around capitalism. And so it's not just doing good because it's the right thing. There are studies, there's research. This is a moneymaker as well. So I think that it is, if you're in it and you're like, I don't care, I'm just about the numbers are speaking as well. So like,
oh, exactly. I mean, it's crazy. The numbers are, I mean, it's absolutely.
Numbers, the buying power, like, the financial model works. So it's just about, going back to how we started, it's about changing what's in here, because the evidence to the contrary is not in favor of your argument. So it's like, that's where, like, that's where we all have to do a little work.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yes. Well, speaking of which, I mean, I could talk to you all day. I mean, I had such a delightful conversation.
Me too. Thank you.
But so yes, in the spirit of let's get back to work here, just where I would love for people to connect with you and the work that you're doing and everything that you're all about. Where can people connect with you online, on social, and what are the things that you're working on?
Yeah, so I have my marketing consulting and strategy firm, Striped Elephant.
It's a great name, by the way. I love that name so much.
Thank you so much. I love it. I could go into detail on the why, but we'll just stop with Striped Elephant, and you can find it at stripesandelephants.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Falayo Lasaki. There's just the one. Definitely not hard to find. And then on Twitter at Just Falayo. And when I say at Just Falayo, it is JUST Falayo, not Falayo. So.
Now, was that because you couldn't get Falayo? I mean...
No, I don't know why I did this, and I didn't realize it was one of those things that when I told people, they're like, so Falayo? And I was like, no, just Falayo. And they're like, so Falayo? I'm like, is this like an addict? Like, what is happening right now? I didn't do it on purpose. It just is a thing that happens. So.
Oh, who's on first?
Yeah. So just Falayo, 2 words.
Awesome. Well, my friend, thank you so much for taking the time to do this today.
Thank you.
I so appreciate you being on the show. And yeah, thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
And that brings us to our last segment, which is one post on CMI's site that I'd love for you to take another look at, an 11 billionth look at, whatever. It's from Ann Ginn, and it's from way back. Remember 2018? Seems like a million years ago. It's from way back in 2018. And the article is called How to Be Purposeful with Your Purpose-Driven Content. And the article is just fantastic and truly even more relevant today than it was back in 2018. Most marketers and, of course, many businesses recognize the value of developing content based on some sort of shared interest, supporting a worthy cause, or taking a stand, like we talked about in the beginning of the show. Success doing this in purpose-driven content, of course, requires that you go beyond that. It demands that you execute the right purpose-driven content marketing strategy in an authentic, organic way that brings benefit to everybody involved. So, successful purpose-driven content marketing has got to feel part of the brand, not just a one-off, a strategy, like we said. For example, changing a company's Facebook profile image to a cause-colored ribbon or something like that, that's a tactic, not a strategy. And this wonderful article goes through some specific examples of companies that have really gotten this right, how they've really taken content marketing and made it an integral part of their purpose-driven strategy. One of my favorite examples from this article is Dick's Sporting Goods, and they created an entire website called sportsmatter.org, and they've created this content brand that shares powerful stories of video and images and all of those who've benefited from getting funding for their local teams. And they provide information, of course, how to get funding for your local sports teams. Just a wonderful project, a wonderful example. So go check out the post, see some great examples of purpose-driven content, and maybe up your brand's game for getting to purpose in what you're trying to do with the brand. And that's it. That's a wrap of episode number 78. I hope you're all out there taking care of each other, truly, truly taking care of each other these days. It's a weird time out there. Wear a mask, folks. Just wear one. It's just that easy. I'm so grateful that you've taken 35 minutes out of your day to watch this show, to listen to the show if you choose to do it that way. And I know 35 minutes is a lot, and so I really appreciate you doing it. I hope you're digging the show. I hope you're digging our video format here of the show, watching it. Let us know, won't you? Hashtag us up on Weekly Wrap. Go review the show. If it's a kind review, we want kind reviews on the podcast. But go hashtag us up, Weekly Wrap. Let us know what guests you might like to see, what kind of content. News items, of course, are always appreciated. All of those things. Let's have the discussion on there on Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever your favorite social channel is. And if you didn't like the show, like you just thought, I'm going to try it, I'm going to watch it, and I'm going to give it 30 minutes, and then you just didn't hate, whatever. Well, in the immortal words of the coolest jazz guy ever, Chet Baker, I get along without you very well. Of course I do. Except when soft rain falls and drip from leaves that I recall. The thrill of being sheltered in your arms, of course I do. But I get very along very well without you. But for now, playing the long game, finding your purpose, the strategy of your purpose. Can you still play? Should you still play the long game? Right now, in the midst of all of this disruptive change, both good and bad, by the way, the pressure to have your purpose figured out, it can be unbearable sometimes. But it's okay to not know your purpose at this exact moment. You do not have to pick right now. Every role, opportunity, project, and job you will take on will help you discover the things that make your soul come alive, your spirit come alive. Playing the long game, finding the wonderful long game, may just be the shortest path to actually discovering it. It's your story, folks. Tell it well. I'll see you next week on the Weekly Wrap.